But say welcome to today's Mishna Yomi. Today we are learning Emirta Hashem, Meseches Peah, Perek Vav, chapter 6, Mishnayos Hey through Vav, Mishnayos 5 through 6. Mishnah Hey says as follows. Mishnah Hey, interestingly enough, gets a little bit more into some of the fundamentals of Shichacha. Shnei Amarim Shichacha, Shlosha Einam Shichacha. If you forget 2 bundles behind in the field, that's considered Shichacha. But if you forget 3, ultimately, again, that is not considered shichacha, and therefore halacha lamaisa, one would be permitted to go back and take those bundles. Shnei tziburei zesim v'charuven shichacha u'shlosha en shichacha. Here's something interesting. We actually saw this in the beginning of the Masechta, alluded to this idea that shichacha doesn't only apply to bundles of wheat, bundles of grain, but rather, again, as we're going to see, that halacha l'maisa, it applies to other items that are normally heaped or put in piles. So, for example, again, shnei tziburei zeisim v'charuvin shichacha. Let's say a person had 2 heaps, 2 piles of olives, or 2 heaps or piles of carobs. So again, each pile, or each heap is the equivalent of a sheaf of wheat. So the idea is that if one forgot 2 sheaves, one forgot 2 bundles, so that's shichacha. So too, if one forgets 2 heaps or 2 piles of olives or carobs, those are shichacha as well. Shlosha eina shichacha. But again, if you forgot 3 piles of olives or carobs, then halacha l'maisa, that is not shichacha. Shnei hutzne pishton shichacha. Now here's what's interesting. So what's interesting to note is as follows, that flax is treated a little bit differently. That a stalk of flax itself is subject to the halachos of shichacha. So interestingly enough, so the Mishnah says, therefore, shnei hutzne pishtan. If you forget 2 stalks of flax, halacha l'maisa, again that's shichacha. But shlosha einan shichacha, 3 stalks of flax are not shichacha. Now, why is flax treated differently? So the Bartanur explains it's very simple. Because flax wasn't gathered in bundles. Because it was never gathered in bundles, it was only gathered stalk by stalk. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, the halachos of shichacha, as they apply to flax, are going to apply to individual stalks and not to bundles. Incredible. Shnei gargirim peret. Listen, we're switching gears now. So remember again, there's a concept of peret. Peret is similar idea shichacha, but this is you're picking grapes. As you're picking grapes, if some of the grapes fall to the ground, the halacha is that you are supposed to leave them for the poor. So again, the same way that when I'm collecting, this is kind of a little bit more similar almost to like leket. When I'm collecting stalks, if the stalks fall on the ground, so I have to leave them for the poor. So too, again, as I'm picking grapes, if grapes fall to the ground, I'll leave them for the poor. Shnei gargirim peret. So the Mishnah says that halacha l'maisa, if you drop 2 grapes, that's peret. Shlosha eina peret. Same idea. 3 grapes, ultimately you're permitted to go back for them. It's not called peret. Shnei shibalim leket. Similar idea, if you drop 2 stalks of grain, that's called leket. Shlosha eina leket. Ultimately, again, 3 stalks are not leket. So actually, a Mishnah like this is really beautiful. We think to ourselves, it would have been great to have this Mishnah like at the beginning of the Masechta, as it really very beautifully lays out all of the halachas. So the Mishnah is off by saying, Eluk k'divrei Beis Hillel. Everything we've spoken until this point in time is Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel essentially adopts what we'll call the 2-3 model. 2 being if you go out and you leave behind the sheaf of wheat, a stalk of flax, 2 grapes. These will be subject to the halachos of leket, shichacha, and peret. We're not talking about peah anymore, but peret. Versus 3 is when you're allowed to go back and take it back for yourself. However, va'akulan Beis Shammai omrim shlosha la'aniyim va'arba la'balabayis. Beis Shammai does not have a 2-3 model. Rather, Beis Shammai has a 3-4 model. Up to 3 items left behind will be subject to leket, shichacha, and peret, but 4 or more items left behind ultimately become the property of the balabayis, and he is permitted to go back and reclaim them and retrieve them. And the Bartanur explains this. The Bartanur says something very interesting. He says, "V'tamayu mishum dechsev la'ani v'lager ta'azovosam." So again, you'll see in the Bartanura, both Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, each darshan the psukim a little bit differently, but again, Beis Hillel has his 2-3 model, Beis Shammai has his 3-4 model. Beautiful. Mishna Vav, an interesting case. An interesting case. Let's say you leave behind a bundle of grain, but this is a zaftig bundle of grain. It's a big bundle. It's a big bundle. How big? That literally, again, it's the size of two sa'ah, which is a huge bundle. So what's the halacha? Eno shechacha. Ultimately, again, it's not shechacha. Now, why is it not shechacha? Because halacha l'maisa is actually very interesting. The Bartanur explains, because at the end of the day, shechacha applies to bundles. But a bundle that is this big is not a bundle. It's not a bundle, it's something else. So because it's so much bigger than a typical bundle, therefore halacha l'maisa, it's not subject to the laws of shechacha. Shnei amarim ubahem sasayim. What happens if you have two bundles, and the two bundles combined are two sa'ah? So now the shaila is, are they shechacha or not? Rabbi Gamliel Omer lebalabais. Rabbi Gamliel says, ultimately they're not shechacha, and therefore halacha l'maisa, the balabais can take them back. V'cham say no la'aniyim, that they are shechacha, since each individual bundle is less than two sa'ah, even though they're combined is two sa'ah, Chacham say it is shechacha. Interesting. Rabbi Gamliel says, V'chi merov ha'amarim yufi koach shabalabayis ahura kocho. So it's interesting. So Rabbi Gamliel says, I don't understand. In this case over here, right, the balabayis is leaving behind more than one bundle. So tell me, says Rabbi Gamliel, when the balabayis leaves behind more bundles, do his rights increase or decrease? So Amr Lahem Yofi Kocho. So the Chacham say, you're right, of course, the more bundles you leave behind, the more, in other words, remember, the more bundles you leave behind, the more of an accumulating right you have to recollect those items you left behind. The less items you leave behind, the less of a right you have to collect them. So therefore, again, Amr Lahem, Rabbi Gamliel says back to the Chachamim, Uma im bizman shu omer echad ubos asayim ushachacho eno shechacha. So Rabbi Gamliel finishes the argument. It's like this. And now, if you left behind one bundle and it was two sa'ah, everyone agrees the balabayas could go back and take it. It's not shechacha. Shnei amorim ubahem sasayim eno din shlei shechacha. Then all the more so if it's two bundles and together they're two sa'ah, certainly they should not be shechacha, and the balabayas should be able to go back and take them. Amrulo. So the Chacham say back to Rabbi Gamliel, not so fast. Lo, imamat ba'omer echad shub kegodish, tomar b'shnei amarim shein kekrichos. So the Chacham say that's not really a fair comparison. When you have one bundle that is the size of two sa'ah, ultimately the reason it's not subject to shicha is because we said before, it's because it's not a bundle. That's not a bundle. That's something else, right? That's something else. The Lashon offers kegodish. Godish means like a huge pile or a stack. So when it's that big, it's not a bundle. If it's not a bundle, it's not subject to shichacha. But tar b'shnei amarim shein kekrichos. But at the end of the day, in this case, where he's leaving behind two bundles, granted their combined volume is two sa'ah, but l'maaseh each individual bundle has the identity of a bundle, and therefore is subject to the din of shechacha. So fascinating machlokes between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim. We will stop over and we'll continue with Mishna Zayin and Ches tomorrow. Wishing everyone a wonderful day.